Hello dear student, welcome back to the series of database management system. Next topic is conceptual design using ER model. The ER model is used to define the conceptual view of database. The work of the ER model revolves around real world entities and the associations between these objects. At view level, the ER model is considered a good option for designing databases. The basic concept of an ER model can be distinctly subdivided into three major categories, namely entities, attributes, and the relationship. What is entity? Entity is nothing but a real world object which exists in the real world and which is having some properties. What are the attributes? Attributes are nothing but the properties of the entity, and relationship means what? The association between two entities. Now what is entity? An entity can define as a real world object irrespective of whether it is animate or inanimate, which is easy to identify. For example, in a company database, employees, dealers, orders and products can be considered as entities. Each of these entities have some specific attributes or properties that provide them their own unique identity. A collection of similar type of entities put together is known as entity set. An entity set may contain entities with attributes sharing similar value. For example, an employee set may contain all the employees of a company. Entity set need not be disjoint. Next is attributes. As mentioned earlier, each entity has a specific set of properties which gives it a unique identity. Entities are represented based on these properties called attributes. All attributes have values. For example, a teacher entity may have name, subject and age as attribute. There exists a domain or range of values that can be assigned to attribute. For example, an employee ID cannot be alphabetical value, it has to be numeric. So what is attributes? Attributes are nothing but properties of an entity. Okay, we represent it by using oval. Okay, and each attribute having some value. We can restrict the values in the attribute, for example like the name of the person where cannot accept integer, employee ID should not accept alphabet. These are the restrictions. Next is relationship. The association shared by multiple entities is called a relationship. For example, an employee works at a department. A teacher teaches a course. Here work at and teaches are called relationship. Okay, so that means the relationship is the association between two entities. Okay, next is mapping cardinalities. So we have four types of mapping cardinalities: one to one, one to many, many to one and many to many. What do you mean by one to one? One to one means one entity is associated with only one entity. For example, one student can enroll for only one course at a time. Next is one to many. For example, one student or one college have many students. What is many to one? Next is many to one. Many to one means many students opt for one exam only. Next is many to many. Many students have many subjects. So these are my mapping cardinalities: one to one, one to many to one and many to many. You need components of entity relationship diagram. First is entity, which is represented by a rectangular box, and we have to write the name of an entity inside that rectangle. Next is weak entity. What is weak entity? It depends on other entity type. They don't have primary keys and have no meaning in the diagram without their parent entity. It is represented by double rectangular box. Next is relationship. Relationships are association between or among entities. It is represented by diamond. Next is weak relationship. Weak relationships are connection between a weak entity and its owner, represented by double diamond. Attributes. Attributes are the properties of any given entity. For example, for student entity, the following will be attributes: ID, email ID, age, address, phone number, etc. It is represented by a horizontal oval. Next is key attribute. A key attribute is one which will uniquely identify and associate identity for an entity. For example, a student, his roll number or his student ID may be its key attribute. For course offered by university, the course code like IT101 will be its key attribute, and it is represented same as horizontal oval of an attribute but has an underline below the same. So key attributes are those attributes which uniquely identify your table. Next is composite attribute. Now what is composite attribute? It composes of multiple units of attribute forming a large one. For example, address may have following composite attributes: house number, street, city, state, country, pin code. It is represented by horizontal ovals mapped with further composite vertical ovals. Okay, so an attribute which can be divided further into different attributes are called as composite attributes. Next is multi-valued attribute. A multi-valued is one which may have more than one value. For example, the phone number for student may be multi-valued, as student may have more than one phone number, and it is represented by double horizontal oval. Next is derived attribute. As the name suggests, it is the one that can be derived or calculated with the help of other attributes present itself. For example, the age of student can be calculated from date of birth present as an attribute, correct? So that means the derived attributes are those which are derived from some another attribute. See the example. See here, student is an entity. What is age? It is in dotted, so that means it is a derived attribute which we are going to derive from date of birth. Student ID, which is this? This is key attribute. Why? Because it is underlined. Mobile number, what is it? It is multi-valued attribute. Why? Because it is double oval. Next, address. Address is composite attribute. Why? Because it is divided further into different attributes. What is name and date of birth? These are my simple attributes. So look at the diagram carefully and understand all the concepts of derived, key attribute, multi-valued attribute, and composite attributes, and the simple attributes. Clear with all the concepts of attributes? Here is the simple example of employee department management, where the department has employees, employees has role, and employees has login. Okay, so this is the simple entity relationship diagram where I have four entities and their relationship, and employee is an entity which have attributes email, phone number, and name. Login is an entity which have attribute username and password. Department is an entity which have name and description. Role is an entity which have name and description. Okay, so this is the simple ER diagram of employee department management. Clear? Now here I have not written cardinality. You have to write one department has many employees, one employee have one role, and one employee has one login. Okay, so these are the mapping cardinalities. Okay, clear?